The arrival. The desert stretched endlessly under the shimmering heat of twin suns, an alien beauty of its own. Everything was quiet, the kind of silence that made you uneasy, as if the world held its breath. Then, out of nowhere, a streak of light tore across the sky, painting the horizon with fiery colors. A loud boom followed, shaking the ground and scaring away the few creatures brave enough to wander the sands. Something had crashed, something not of this world. Dr. Marcus Kane stood by his weathered truck, a notebook in one hand and a worn map in the other. He had spent the day searching for old artifacts, relics from a forgotten past. The crash startled him, his gaze snapping to the horizon. Smoke rose in the distance, a thin black ribbon against the blue sky. Curiosity and instinct pulled him toward it. Whatever had fallen wasn't ordinary. He could feel it in his bones. It took Marcus almost an hour to reach the crash site. As he drove closer, the air seemed to change. A strange hum filled his ears, faint but persistent, like a whisper he couldn't understand. His truck sputtered and stopped 100 yards from the site. The electronics had failed. Frustrated, Marcus grabbed his pack and continued on foot. When he reached the wreckage, he froze. The object before him wasn't a meteor or a fallen satellite. It was a ship, sleek, silver, and otherworldly. The surface shimmered as if alive, reflecting the sunlight in a way that seemed unnatural. Heat radiated off it, making the air around it shimmer. Marcus hesitated, but forced himself to move closer. His heart pounded in his chest. The sound of a faint groan stopped him in his tracks. Someone was alive. He scanned the area, his eyes darting across the wreckage, until he saw her. She was unlike anything he'd ever seen. She sat slumped against a piece of the wreckage, her body glowing faintly in the dim light. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, almost translucent, and her long silver hair fell in tangled waves around her. Her eyes, large and filled with pain, were a striking gold. She clutched her stomach, her breathing shallow and labored. Marcus could see the faint traces of blood, or something like it, staining her suit. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, his voice shaking. He doubted she could understand him, but he had to try. The alien woman looked up at him, her golden eyes locking onto his. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Then she spoke, her voice melodic but strange. The words were incomprehensible, but the desperation in her tone was clear. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and Marcus instinctively rushed forward to catch her. Her body was warm, much warmer than a human's. She flinched at his touch but didn't pull away. Marcus gently lowered her to the ground, his mind racing. Who was she? Where had she come from? And why was she here? As he examined her injuries, something caught his attention. Her stomach wasn't just bruised. It seemed alive. The faint glow from her body was strongest there, and every so often, he thought he saw something shift under her skin. A chill ran down his spine. "What is this?" he muttered to himself, but the woman seemed to understand his unease. She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength and shook her head, as if warning him not to interfere. Marcus glanced back at the ship. The hum he had heard earlier was growing louder, more insistent. It wasn't just a sound. It felt like a vibration in his chest, like the ship was calling out. To whom, he didn't know, but it made him uneasy. "We need to get out of here," he said, though he doubted she understood. He helped her to her feet, her body trembling with every step. She leaned heavily on him, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. As they moved away from the wreckage, Marcus's mind raced. This wasn't just an ordinary crash. The ship, the woman, whatever was happening to her, it was all connected. He didn't know how, but he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The desert around them seemed to grow quieter, as if the world itself was watching. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed, though when he looked back, there was nothing but empty sand. The hum from the ship faded as they moved farther away, but it left an impression, a lingering unease that Marcus couldn't ignore. The woman tried to speak again, her voice weak but insistent. She pointed to the horizon, her golden eyes pleading. Marcus didn't understand her words, but he understood her urgency. Whatever they were running from, it was coming. And it wasn't far behind. With the alien woman leaning on him and questions swirling in his mind, Marcus pushed forward, unaware of how much his life was about to change. The discovery. The faint hum of alien energy filled Marcus's hidden lab, vibrating just below the edge of hearing. The alien woman, whom Marcus had carefully placed on the examination table, lay motionless. Her shimmering skin caught the dim light from the lab's overhead lamps, creating an almost hypnotic glow. Marcus couldn't help but feel like he was standing on the edge of something monumental, a discovery that could change everything he knew about the universe. The equipment in his lab, decades old and patched together from scraps, blinked to life as he worked. Wires snaked across the floor, connected to monitors that whirred softly. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow and glanced at the scanner he had pointed at her abdomen. What he saw made him freeze. There it was again, a faint movement beneath her skin. It wasn't just a random twitch or a symptom of injury. It was purposeful, deliberate. Whatever was inside her was alive. Marcus leaned closer, the scanner in his hand trembling slightly. A cluster of bright signals appeared on the screen, each one pulsing in a synchronized rhythm. They weren't random. They were communicating. "What the hell are you carrying?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible in the still room. The woman stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, Marcus felt a wave of emotions wash over him. Fear, desperation, and something deeper, something ancient. She tried to sit up, but her body trembled with the effort. "Easy," Marcus said, his voice softer now. "You're safe here, but I need to know what's happening to you." She didn't reply. Instead, she raised a trembling hand and pointed to the scanner. Her expression was urgent, almost pleading. Marcus hesitated, then turned the monitor toward her. Her eyes widened as she took in the pulsing signals. She muttered something in her melodic, alien tongue, her voice rising in agitation. "I don't understand," Marcus said, shaking his head. "You're going to have to help me out here." The woman clenched her fists in frustration, then closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the glow in her irises intensified. To Marcus's shock, his tablet screen lit up, filled with a cascade of strange symbols and images. They moved too fast for him to comprehend, but he recognized one thing immediately: an image of Earth, surrounded by alien ships. "What is this?" Marcus asked, his voice edged with panic. "Are they coming here? Are they after you?" The woman placed a hand over her stomach, her fingers splayed as if trying to shield the life, or the thing, growing inside her. Her gaze met Marcus's again, and this time, her expression told him everything. Whatever was inside her, it wasn't just a random organism. It was important, vital, and it wasn't meant to be here. Marcus felt a chill creep down his spine. This isn't just some accident, is it? You didn't crash here by mistake." She nodded, her movements slow and deliberate. Then, with great effort, she pointed to herself, and then to the scanner. Her meaning was clear. Whatever was inside her, it was the reason she was here. But the question remained: was it a threat or a chance? Before Marcus could process the implications, an alert blared from his perimeter sensors. His heart jumped as he glanced at the monitor. Multiple heat signatures were moving toward the lab. Fast. "They found us," he muttered, his mind racing. He turned to the woman, who was already trying to stand despite her obvious weakness. Marcus grabbed her arm to steady her. "We need to move now. Whatever you're carrying, they want it. And I'm guessing they won't ask nicely." As they prepared to leave, Marcus caught one last glimpse of the scanner. The signals had changed, their rhythm now urgent, almost frantic. It was as if the organism inside her knew they were in danger, And as the first flash of light from an approaching vehicle lit up the desert night, Marcus realized something else. Whatever was growing inside her, it wasn't just alive. It was aware. The chase. The lab door burst open, slamming against the wall with a metallic clang. Marcus spun around, his heart racing. Shadows flickered in the dim light as the first figure stepped inside. It wasn't human. Tall, with sleek, insect-like limbs and glowing red eyes, the intruder moved with a predatory grace. Behind it, more figures emerged, each armed with strange weapons that hummed ominously. They weren't bounty hunters. They were something worse. They were hunters from the same world as the alien woman. Marcus's pulse pounded in his ears. The woman, Lyra, as he had started to call her, clutched his arm, her silver eyes wide with terror. She whispered a single word in her melodic tongue, her voice trembling. Marcus didn't understand the language, but he knew what it meant. Run. Without hesitation, he grabbed a small backpack filled with tools and data and pulled Lyra toward the back exit. They stumbled into the night, the desert air biting against their skin. Behind them, the alien hunters moved methodically, their footsteps crunching on the lab floor. One of them raised a device, and the air shimmered as it activated a tracker. Marcus felt a sharp jolt of panic. They could track Lyra, or worse, whatever was inside her. Keep moving. Marcus hissed, dragging her along as they raced toward his jeep. He had parked it a mile from the lab, hidden in a rocky outcropping. The ground was uneven, and Lyra stumbled several times, her strength waning. Marcus caught her each time, his own body screaming in protest. He wasn't built for this kind of exertion, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Behind them, the hunters began their pursuit. They moved impossibly fast, their elongated limbs propelling them across the sand like predators chasing prey. Marcus risked a glance back and saw their red eyes glowing in the dark, unblinking and relentless. Faster, Lyra, he urged, his voice hoarse. She nodded weakly, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The hunters weren't just fast. They were intelligent. One of them raised a weapon and fired a blast of energy that struck the ground near Marcus's feet, sending up a shower of sand and debris. He cursed under his breath, pulling Lyra to the side as another blast narrowly missed them. As they reached the rocky outcropping, Marcus spotted the jeep, half hidden by the shadows. Relief flooded through him. Almost there, he shouted, though he wasn't sure if Lyra could hear him over the pounding of her own heart. They reached the vehicle, and Marcus yanked open the door. He practically shoved Lyra inside before scrambling into the driver's seat. The keys were already in the ignition. He always left them there, just in case. The engine roared to life, and the jeep lurched forward, kicking up a cloud of sand as it sped away. The hunters didn't stop. They moved with terrifying precision, their forms silhouetted against the moonlit desert. One of them leaped onto a nearby rock, aiming a weapon directly at the jeep's tires. Marcus swerved violently, narrowly avoiding the blast. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white. "What the hell do they want?" he muttered, glancing at Lyra. She was slumped against the door, her body trembling. Her hands clutched her abdomen protectively, and her silver eyes were filled with pain and fear. One of the hunters leaped onto the back of the jeep, its claws scraping against the metal roof. Marcus cursed, reaching for the wrench he had stashed under the seat. Without thinking, he swung it upward, the heavy tool connecting with a sickening crunch. The hunter screeched, its grip loosening just enough for the jeep's violent swerving to throw it off. "They're not stopping," Marcus said through gritted teeth. He pressed the accelerator harder, the engine protesting as the jeep raced across the uneven terrain. The hunters were relentless, their determination unnerving. Whatever was inside Lyra, it wasn't just important, it was vital. As the jeep climbed a steep dune, Marcus spotted a canyon ahead. Its jagged edges and narrow paths offered a chance to lose their pursuers. He turned to Lyra, his voice urgent. "Hold on. This is going to get rough." The Jeep plunged into the canyon, its tires skidding on the loose rocks. The walls loomed high on either side, casting deep shadows that seemed to swallow the vehicle. The hunters hesitated for the first time, their forms pausing at the canyon's edge. Marcus allowed himself a fleeting moment of hope. Then the hum of an alien device filled the air, and Marcus's stomach dropped. Above them, a sleek, triangular ship descended, its underside glowing with the same eerie light as the hunters' weapons. The hunters weren't chasing them blindly. They had backup. Marcus gritted his teeth, his mind racing. The canyon was narrow, and the ship couldn't follow them directly. If he could just keep going, they might stand a chance. But Lyra was weakening, and the Jeep was already struggling on the rough terrain. Time was running out. As the ship's lights illuminated the canyon, Marcus glanced at Lyra. Her silver eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw something new in her gaze. Determination. Whatever was inside her wasn't just growing, it was waking up. And Marcus realized, with a sinking feeling, that the real danger wasn't behind them. It was beside him. The bond. The canyon walls closed in around them, the narrow path forcing Marcus to slow the Jeep. The rumble of the alien ship overhead grew distant, but Marcus knew it wouldn't be long before it found them again. He glanced at Lyra, slumped in the passenger seat, her glowing skin dim and her breath shallow. "Hey," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Stay with me. We're not out of this yet." Lyra's eyes fluttered open, the golden glow within them flickering like a dying flame. She looked at Marcus, her gaze heavy with exhaustion and something else. "Trust." She muttered something in her alien tongue, the word soft and musical. "I don't understand," Marcus said, his frustration bubbling over. "I don't know what you're saying, but if you're trying to tell me something, now's the time." Lyra reached out, her trembling hand resting against Marcus's forehead. The moment her fingers touched his skin, a flood of images and emotions surged through him. It wasn't just a connection. It was a sharing, a merging of minds. Marcus gasped as visions filled his mind. A vast alien city bathed in golden light, Lyra standing before a council of beings, their faces stern and unyielding. He saw her fleeing, clutching her stomach as an explosion rocked the scene behind her. Then came the darkness. He saw the hunters, their insect-like forms moving with precision, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. And finally, he saw the thing inside her, a pulsing light, warm and powerful, with a presence that felt ancient and alive. Marcus jerked back, the connection breaking. His hands trembled on the steering wheel as he tried to process what he had just experienced. You ran to protect it," he whispered. "That thing inside you. It's not just a life. What is it? A weapon? A key?" Lyra nodded weakly, her hand returning to her abdomen. She whispered a single word, her voice filled with both reverence and fear. "Hope." Marcus's breath caught. Whatever was inside her, it wasn't just important to her people, it was the only thing standing between survival and annihilation. And now it was in his hands too. The Jeep jolted as Marcus navigated a sharp turn, the rocky path barely wide enough to accommodate the vehicle. The canyon walls loomed higher, the shadows growing darker. He needed to find a safe place to stop and think, but the hunters wouldn't give them that chance. "I can't do this alone," Marcus said, glancing at Lyra. "I need to know how to help you. What do I need to do?" Lyra's eyes glowed brighter for a moment, and she gestured weakly toward the pack of tools on the floor. Marcus reached down, pulling it onto his lap. Inside, nestled among his gadgets, was a small round device, alien in design, with markings that matched the symbols on Lyra's ship. He hadn't even realized he'd taken it in the chaos of their escape. "What is this?" he asked, holding it up. Lyra placed her hand over his, her fingers pressing a sequence of symbols on the device. It hummed to life, projecting a small holographic map into the air. The map showed the canyon, with a glowing point far ahead. A safe place. Marcus guessed, and Lyra nodded. Before Marcus could act, a screech echoed through the canyon, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws on rock. The hunters had found them. Marcus's grip tightened on the wheel as adrenaline surged through his veins. He shoved the device into the dashboard, locking the map into view. "Hold on," he muttered, slamming his foot on the accelerator. The Jeep roared forward, bouncing violently over the uneven ground. Lyra braced herself, her glowing eyes fixed on the path ahead. As they raced deeper into the canyon, Marcus felt a shift. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was something more. They were connected now, bound by a shared purpose. And whatever it took, he was going to keep her safe. Because what Lyra carried wasn't just her hope. It was humanity's hope, too. The betrayal. The narrow canyon eventually opened into a vast, rocky basin under a starlit sky. The map Lyra had activated led them to a small, abandoned outpost carved into the canyon walls. Its metallic structure was old and rusted, a relic of a long-forgotten mining operation. Marcus pulled the Jeep to a stop, the engine sputtering before going silent. The quiet felt fragile, as if the slightest noise might shatter it. Lyra staggered out of the vehicle, clutching her abdomen. Her glow was fainter now, flickering like a dying flame. Marcus hurried to her side, steadying her as they moved toward the outpost. Inside, the air was stale and dust coated every surface. The dim emergency lights still flickered, powered by some ancient generator. Marcus helped Lyra to a corner and lowered her onto a makeshift seat. Her breathing was shallow, her body trembling. Whatever was happening inside her, it was accelerating. "You need rest," Marcus said, his voice firm. He rummaged through his pack, pulling out a canteen and offering her water. She hesitated before taking a small sip, her glowing eyes watching him with quiet gratitude. As Marcus set up his equipment to monitor Lyra's condition, the silence was broken by the faint hum of a comm device. He froze. The signal wasn't his. Slowly, he turned toward Lyra, his heart sinking. She wasn't holding anything, but the faint hum grew louder, emanating from her abdomen. "It's transmitting," Marcus whispered, his mind racing. "They can track you. Know it." Before Marcus could disable the signal, the sound of footsteps echoed through the outpost. He spun around, his pulse quickening. Emerging from the shadows was someone he didn't expect, Dr. Elena Vega, his former colleague. She was dressed in tactical gear, her expression a mix of relief and triumph. "Marcus," Elena said, her voice calm but edged with authority. "I've been tracking you." "And her?" "How? How did you even know?" Marcus stammered, his mind scrambling for answers. Elena had been a trusted friend once, but her sudden appearance reeked of something darker. Elena smirked, pulling a small tracking device from her pocket. "You really think the government wasn't monitoring you? Your lab flagged activity the moment her ship entered our atmosphere. I just followed the trail." Marcus's stomach churned. "You sold me out," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "No, Marcus. I saved you," Elena replied, her tone sharp. "Do you even understand what you've gotten yourself into? What she's carrying? That thing inside her, it's not some miracle. It's a threat." Marcus stepped in front of Lyra, his stance protective. "She's not a threat. She's running from one." Elena shook her head, her eyes narrowing. "You're blinded by your naivety. That thing inside her isn't just growing. It's evolving. It's a weapon designed to rewrite entire ecosystems, to terraform planets for her kind. If it hatches, it could consume this entire planet." Lyra's eyes widened, and she weakly muttered something in her alien tongue. Marcus felt the tension rise, his mind reeling. Could Elena be right? Or was she twisting the truth? "She's not your enemy," Marcus argued, his voice rising. "She's trying to protect us, from something worse." Elena's face hardened, and she drew a small cylindrical device from her belt. It hummed ominously. "I can't take that risk, Marcus. Step aside. We need to extract it, And if she doesn't survive, that's a sacrifice we have to make. Marcus's fists clenched, his thoughts racing. He had trusted Elena once, but now her cold logic made him question everything. He glanced back at Lyra, her glowing eyes pleading silently with him. "You're not touching her," Marcus said, his voice firm. "If you want it, you'll have to go through me." Elena sighed, her expression one of pity. "You always were too sentimental." She raised the device, and Marcus's muscles tensed, ready to fight. Before she could act, the hum of alien energy filled the room. Lyra's glow flared suddenly, her body trembling as the organism inside her reacted to the danger. The ground beneath them shook, and the air seemed to ripple with heat. "What the—" Elena started, but the words died in her throat. Lyra stood, her body radiating light, her expression no longer fearful but resolute. The organism inside her wasn't just reacting. It was defending her. Marcus stepped back, shielding his eyes from the blinding glow. He could feel the power in the air, a force that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Elena froze, her device slipping from her hand as she stared at Lyra in disbelief. The hunters had tracked them here, but Marcus realized something important. Lyra wasn't just running from them. She was evolving into something they couldn't control. And in that moment, Marcus knew there was no turning back. He had to choose a side. Elena's cold pragmatism or Lyra's fragile hope. The weight of that choice hung heavy in the air as the glow from Lyra's body intensified, casting long shadows on the walls around them. The revelation. The air shimmered with an otherworldly energy, the glow from Lyra's body pulsing in time with the faint vibrations in the room. Marcus shielded his eyes, sweat beading on his brow as the sheer intensity of the moment pressed down on him. Lyra stood taller now, her form illuminated by the organism inside her. Whatever pain she'd been enduring was gone, replaced by an unsettling calm. "Lyra," Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. "What's happening to you?" Lyra raised a hand, her slender fingers tracing a symbol in the air. The glowing mark lingered, suspended like a hologram. It shimmered before expanding into a projection that filled the room. Marcus and Elena both froze as the image unfolded, a galactic map, vast and intricate, with Earth highlighted in a soft golden glow. Around it, other planets blinked in red, their orbits tangled in chaotic patterns. This is a star map," Marcus muttered, stepping closer. He recognized the shapes, the constellations, but something about the red planets sent a chill down his spine. Lyra's golden eyes locked onto Marcus, and she spoke in her melodic tongue. This time, the organism within her amplified her words, converting them into English, each syllable resonating with a strange layered harmony. "My people were not the first," she began. Her voice was calm, but heavy with sorrow. "Long ago, we found ruins, traces of a civilization older than any we'd known. They had created something, a seed, a gift and a curse. It could terraform planets, reshape life, but only at great cost." Marcus's heart raced as the pieces started to fall into place. "The thing inside you, it's the seed, isn't it?" Lyra nodded. "We thought we could control it. We were wrong. The hunters, those who pursue me, they are not my people. They are what remains of those who tried to wield the seed's power and were consumed by it." Elena, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward, her face pale. "You're telling me that thing inside you is some kind of ancient bioweapon. And you brought it here." Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Lyra turned to Elena, her expression both wary and defiant. "I did not bring it here. It chose this place." She gestured to the map, where Earth glowed brighter than ever. "Your world, your species, you are connected to the seed in ways I do not yet understand. But it called to you." Elena shook her head, her hand trembling as she pointed at Lyra. "This is madness. If that thing activates, it could destroy everything. You're risking billions of lives for what?" A chance. Marcus stepped between them, his voice firm. It's not just a weapon, Elena. It's something more. You saw the map. It's not just random destruction. It's choosing where it can thrive, where it can grow. Maybe Earth is part of that. And if it's not? Elena snapped, her face flushed with anger. If it burns everything to the ground instead. Lyra's glow dimmed slightly as she stepped forward, her voice quieter now. I do not seek to harm. I seek to understand. But the hunters will not stop. They do not care about balance. They care only for control. Marcus stared at the map, his mind a whirlwind of questions. The seed wasn't just alive. It was intelligent, ancient, and somehow tied to humanity's past. But why? What was its purpose? And why had it chosen Lyra as its vessel? As if sensing his thoughts, Lyra reached out and touched his shoulder. Her golden eyes bore into his, and for a moment, Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. Images flooded his mind again. Earth in its infancy, alien ships watching over a planet teeming with untapped potential, and a seed buried deep within the soil, waiting for its time to awaken. It's been here before, Marcus whispered. The seed, it's part of us. Elena scoffed, but there was fear in her eyes. And that's supposed to make it safe. You're betting everything on a gamble. No, Marcus said, turning to face her. I'm betting on something bigger than us. Something we don't fully understand yet. But if we destroy it, we might be losing the key to our future. Lyra's glow brightened once more, and the map shifted, revealing a final image. The hunter's fleet, closing in fast. Time was running out. Elena stared at the projection, her jaw tightening. If they get here, none of this will matter. We won't have a future. Lyra stepped forward, her glow steady. Then we must act. Together. Marcus looked between Lyra and Elena, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The decision wasn't just his. It was all of theirs. And it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about what kind of future they were willing to fight for. The sacrifice. The hunter's fleet descended like a shadow over the canyon, their ships blotting out the starlit sky. The air buzzed with alien energy as beams of light scanned the ground, searching, probing. Inside the ancient outpost, the tension was palpable. Lyra stood at the center of the room, her glow steady and defiant. The organism within her pulsed in rhythm, an echo of her determination. Marcus and Elena flanked her, their uneasy alliance forged in the heat of survival. The galactic map Lyra had projected still hung in the air, its glowing points now joined by ominous red markers, symbols of the hunters closing in. We can't outrun them this time, Marcus said, his voice grim. This place is a trap. Elena adjusted the grip on her weapon, her jaw clenched. Then we fight. If they want what's inside her, they'll have to go through us. No, Lyra said softly, her voice carrying a weight that silenced them both. She turned to face Marcus, her golden eyes shimmering with a mixture of sadness and resolve. This is my burden to bear, not yours. What are you talking about? Marcus asked, stepping closer. We're in this together. Lyra placed a hand on his chest, her touch light but firm. The seed is awake now. It remembers, and it knows what must be done. She turned to the map, her fingers tracing a path toward a distant, pulsating point. There is a place, a nexus of energy where the seed can complete its transformation. But it requires a choice. Marcus frowned. What kind of choice? Lyra hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. The hunters were right about one thing. The seed reshapes everything it touches. If it is allowed to grow unchecked, it could consume this planet. But if it bonds with me fully, I can guide it. I can ensure it doesn't destroy. Elena's eyes narrowed. That sounds like a big if. And what happens to you? Lyra's silence was answer enough. No, Marcus said, his voice shaking. There has to be another way. We can figure this out. We just need time. We don't have time, Lyra interrupted, her tone firm but kind. "The hunters will not stop, and the seed will not wait. This is the only way to protect your world." Outside, the ground trembled as the hunters' forces drew closer. The hum of their ships grew louder, their shadows creeping into the outpost like encroaching darkness. Marcus looked at Lyra, his mind racing. He had never believed in destiny, but standing there, he felt its weight pressing down on them all. "What happens if you bond with it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra smiled faintly. "I will no longer be just myself. I will become something more, a bridge between my kind and yours. But I won't survive the process as I am now." Alina cursed under her breath, pacing the room. "This is insane. You're talking about sacrificing yourself for a gamble. For a planet that isn't even yours." Lyra turned to Alina, her expression calm. "Your world is more connected to this than you know. Humanity was chosen long ago, just as I was. The seed saw something in you, something worth protecting." Marcus's throat tightened as he struggled to find the right words. "You don't have to do this alone." "I am not alone," Lyra said softly, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Because of you, I know what it means to hope, to fight for something greater than myself." The moment was broken by the sound of metal scraping against stone. The hunters had arrived, their forms silhouetted against the glowing lights of their ships. Weapons hummed with deadly energy as they advanced, their red eyes fixed on the outpost. "There's no time," Lyra said, stepping toward the map's glowing nexus point. The seed within her began to pulse faster, its light growing brighter. The hunters hesitated, their movements faltering as if sensing the power building within her. Marcus grabbed her arm, his voice desperate. "Lyra, wait. You don't have to do this. We can find another way." She placed her hand over his, her touch warm and steady. "You taught me something your kind has always understood, Marcus. Sacrifice is not the end. It's the beginning of something new." Before he could respond, Lyra stepped into the center of the room. The seed's glow engulfed her, its light spreading outward like a star being born. The hunters screeched, their weapons firing wildly, but the beams were swallowed by the radiance. Marcus shielded his eyes as the room filled with a blinding light. And then silence. When Marcus opened his eyes, the hunters were gone. The ships, the weapons, all of it vanished. The room was quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the outpost's old generator. Lyra was no longer there, but the map still glowed faintly, the nexus point now marked with a golden star. "She did it," Alina muttered, her voice soft with awe. "She actually did it." Marcus stared at the map, his chest heavy with grief and wonder. Lyra had made her choice, and in doing so, she had saved them all. But she had also left them with something more. A chance to be better, to rise above their fears and divisions. As Marcus stepped out into the cool desert night, he looked up at the sky. The stars seemed brighter, closer, as if watching over him. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Lyra's sacrifice had not been in vain.